the NFL is appealing Deshaun Watson's 6-game suspension. How do you expect this situation to play out going forward? Zach, if you want to do the honors.
Yeah, well, and I didn't really get into full detail with this when we discussed Deshaun Watson on Monday, but one of the more peculiar things in this whole Deshaun Watson story, since we've been following it, is there was a little excerpt that came out from Sue Robinson of her giving her thoughts on why she decided to make it a 6-game suspension and just the process going in, what factored into her decision. And there were just a ton of things in that little excerpt that really surprised me. And the thought that, okay, the suspension per her decision was only going to be 6 games when she calls Deshaun Watson and his actions the most egregious thing the NFL has seen. When she just describes some of the things that really went on with Deshaun Watson, it's pretty disgusting. Like, I don't want to get into it, but it's bad stuff. And really, the thought was the reason why this was only a 6-game suspension was because we know there was no concrete legal evidence that they could use as proof to confirm that these things went on when you compare that to some of the other cases in the NFL with lower numbers of victims, allegedly, but you had the proof. And Deshaun Watson himself has even to admit to some weird behavior. And I think the conclusion is this Sue Robinson and her decision to make it a 6-game suspension, that was her choice based on a lot on the legal system and the fact that there was no proof, there was no evidence. The NFL apparently didn't do a great job in the 4 cases they brought to the table. They didn't do a great job with that. And still, Roger Goodell, he now has the power to ultimately make the decision with this appeal. And the word has been that he's going to be pushing for a 1-year suspension. He's been doing that since this whole thing has started. And I think in that little Sue Robinson excerpt, that gave the NFL really everything they needed to really put the hammer down on Deshaun Watson and make it a pretty long suspension, at least way more than 6 games. Because just when you look at the situation from a whole, Deshaun Watson, we know, was the quarterback of the Houston Texans, and then all these lawsuits started coming in. And I do think that Deshaun Watson sitting out that last year in Houston, that should not count towards a suspension. He still got full pay for that season, and he basically quit on the Texans. The Texans let him just sit out for the season. They took the year off, and they decided to trade him to the Cleveland Browns, got a lot back. But Deshaun Watson, like, ever since he decided to leave Houston, it seemed to me that a lot of the coverage of this has been, whichever team is getting him is about to win some lottery. Whatever team is getting him is about to be the ultimate winner of the NFL offseason. And I never viewed it like that. It's been very frustrating for me to see the media coverage of this. And it just has seemed that Deshaun Watson almost got rewarded for his actions, getting that big contract, getting to leave Houston like he really wanted to. And I think the NFL from afar has realized, like, okay, this guy has just not suffered enough. He's not been given the proper consequences. And ultimately, I do think Roger Goodell is going to throw the hammer down and give him that pretty long suspension. I really do. And a lot of that does have to do with the fact that that Sue Robinson excerpt, she said those things by herself, but didn't really give the appropriate punishment. I think the NFL will do that. I really do.
I would like to jump in here quickly, and then I'm going to pass it over to Zay. I think when you talk about media coverage, Zach, I'm not sure if we watching the same media cats, but I know from what I've seen, in the media, it's not pro Watson. It hasn't been. But there's also an off switch where they have to talk about football. It's one thing to dive into a situation and give your feelings about what happened in the situation. Okay, these are the accusers. Deshaun Watson is disgusting, things of that nature. But you're a football show, so you have to dive into the football analytics side of things and how does his, presence help the Browns. So I think that's what we do here as well, because we're not strictly in politics, even though this topic gives us an outlet to briefly, touch into the legal sides of things, even though we are not judges here. So we kind of got to dip and dabble and do what we came here to do, which is talk sports at the same time. So I think from a sports side, I agree. I side with most people that think, whenever Watson plays, right now there's a lot of uncertainty. I thought we had some clarity. That clarity only lasted a couple of days. Now we are back to the unknown. And this could go a multitude of ways, right? Deshaun Watson could very well play this season, week 1, if the NFLPA decides to take it to court. And now we don't know what happens on the back end of the season, nor do we know what happens in the season in general. So now we are back to the same square one. and I'm back with my same thoughts, is that this situation is very hard to speak on, from that legal side. And from a football side, I still think that the Browns had themselves a guy. Baker Mayfield did not do what he was supposed to do. That's why he's not there no more. I'm pretty sure if Baker Mayfield did, they would not take a risk with a guy with 25 accusers, but that's just me. Another thing that I want to emphasize, and I can't emphasize enough, is that I wish that the NFL kept the same energy when it came to these owners. You know what I'm saying? Because cats like Robert Kraft got off. Dan Snyder, the guy from Washington Commanders, the NFL is like, my name is Bennett and I'm not in it. You could tell that Roger Goodell really don't want to, he feels uncomfortable there. And, Stephen Ross, he just got suspended for tampering until October. Okay. He got suspended till October for tampering, right? Not only tampering. First of all, he was investigated for tanking. They came up with tampering. So clearly that was 2 infractions. And you combine that, he only gets suspended for a couple months. When Calvin Ridley was betting on the game, he got suspended for a whole year. So I know two wrongs don't make a right, but 2 fails equal reciprocity. You know what I'm saying? So the NFL got to do something about that. And I think when you try to be the hero and you're the NFL, this is your golden opportunity to try to rewrite your wrongs, even though I don't think you can. But in the eyes of the media, you can be a hero and wipe the slate clean completely. And let's see if the NFL continues to do that and try to do that.
Hey man, y'all both made great points. I think the main thing here is that Deshaun Watson almost got away with literal almost got away with everything. Scot free. He got paid almost close to $300 million guaranteed. This guy had all these cases, looming, and still ongoing investigation. Got the money, and then almost ran away with 6 games only suspended after all those cases. If Goodell is trying to protect the integrity of the league, the same league that suspended Calvin Ridley a full season for gambling on the games, which is, it attacks the integrity of the league. You have to make sure that Deshaun Watson.
But what about Stephen Ross? Like, I don't mean to cut you off, but like, you just went over my point. Like, why is the owners not being held to the same standard? And even though in the NFL, there's a writing that said the owners are actually held to a higher standard than the players. So what are we doing here?
I mean, did the 60 cases come up and say Stephen Ross should be refining for something?
It's you suspend somebody for the integrity of the game for a whole year, and this guy was investigated for one thing. Another thing came up that wasn't even on the radar. He should have been suspended for a whole year, something like that. You have to. Where's the responsibility in that?
I'll say this. I think a lot of it has to do with, even though the owners are the leader of the team and the guys with all the money and technically they do work, or Roger Goodell does work for them. So I think that has something to do with it as well. But I think when it comes, we know since the beginning of this case, we've been talking about perception, and we've known that a lot of the NFL's decision, it's going to go by how the perception of it and how it looks to other people. And I just think when it comes to perception compared to the owner, the starting quarterback is the face of the franchise, the guy that's going out there on the field that we see each and every day. And I just think, even though it really isn't right that the owners and the players aren't getting the same punishment, even though every case is different. It's apples and oranges, case by case basis. I do think the fact that we would see Deshaun Watson on the field 17 seasons a year, that has something to do with the fact that the punishment would be so high compared to an owner who we just hear about in the news. We don't really see that often. But when we're seeing press conferences with Deshaun Watson every day, when we're seeing him on the field every week, I think that's where it comes in as well.
I don't think that's a valid excuse, but go ahead, Zay. I understand. Not saying you're wrong. You're probably right, but I don't think that's a valid morally, to do what they did. But go ahead.
2 wrongs don't make a right. And that's one thing for sure. I think, Stephen Ross, if the NFL, like I said, as Lil said, Stephen Ross should be held with a higher standard and given a penalty for tampering and stuff like that. But when we talk about Deshaun Watson, it's just an entirely, it's an inhumane kind of thing. If someone came up and had 60 cases that wasn't an athlete, he probably got arrested for 30, 40 years in jail. It didn't matter if he was guilty or not. They would have put him in jail until he had evidence, until he was proven innocent. 60 cases is ridiculous. And the fact that Deshaun Watson is able to just walk scot-free, walk around here, and the only thing he has to face is 6-game suspension, and then his camp comes out and say, well, he should have got no games. That is just ridiculous, to say the least. It's really disgusting, not only from his camp standpoint, but even the Houston Texans that protected that for years. We don't even know how many years he was protected under the Texans for going through that, because they settled many cases themselves. So it's kind of he deserves the max punishment, in my opinion. I think 1 year is not enough. I think he should get 1 game suspended per case that he was accused of until proven innocent on each one. But that's just how I feel, because I just feel like that's a disgusting matter in the fact that he might get away with only 6 games, or if the NFL does appeal and then 6 games is still the cause or whatever. I'm just not all for it. It's really disgusting.
Real quickly, Zach, because it in lines with what Zay said. You see, Zay, you coming from a point where it's very fair and it's very plausible and it's very right? Because let me first start by saying that we don't condone this type of behavior on the show. This is not something that we're supporting. This is not a pro Watson type of show where we just, trying to say he's innocent. He need to, be exonerated, things of that nature. But what you just said, when I made my point about Stephen Ross, you try to make it, you said, all right, well, allegations and sexual assault and the integrity of the game, that's 2 different things. Cool. I'm not comparing those 2. What I'm comparing is Stephen Ross and Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley betted on a game, okay, that he wasn't even playing in, got suspended for a whole year. This guy, Stephen Ross, was investigated for tanking, and they came up with tampering, even though people in the organization said that there was words said about tanking, but yet he's only suspended for October, and you take a couple picks. Like I said before, that's what I'm comparing. And that's where the NFLPA, that's why they had such a great of an argument, because the NFL has not been consistent when it comes to these suspensions. They've been holding other players into a different standard and then the owners into a different standard. And that's why Stu Robinson couldn't help but give him 6 games. It's like y'all came up, y'all had an opportunity, 24 accusers to choose from. Y'all came with 4 or 5. Y'all had so many to choose from, and y'all came and present a good case. Now you forcing my hand to just go by what y'all been going by. Simple. Yeah, a lot of people's acting like Sue Robinson and Deshaun Watson went to Fat Burger before the trial together. Nah, it's about the evidence and who can present the evidence the best. Go ahead,
I think the issue for me has been, since these lawsuits have been coming in, there's been nothing based on Deshaun Watson's actions since then that have told me he feels remorseful or that he's sorry. As a matter of fact, it's the opposite. It feels like he's getting rewarded with that big contract, getting to leave Houston. And I think if I was the NFL, that's really what would set me off. The fact that this guy he hasn't been punished in any way. He's not losing any money. A 6-game suspension is light, in my opinion. He would be extremely fortunate if that's what ends up happening. And I just think if you're the NFL, the system that you set up in that CBA has failed you, with Sue Robinson making the initial decision. And now Roger Goodell finally really has the chance to use the power and use everything that was shown in that Sue Robinson excerpt and say, okay, like, enough is enough. Deshaun Watson has just dragged the shield through the mud for the last 12 months, and enough is enough. And I think if you're Roger Goodell, this is really, in all of his career, this is going to be a time for him really to attempt to make up for the Ray Rice situation and an attempt to make up for all of the other suspensions to players or even owners that just have not been right over the past few years. And I know it might not be fair, but the matter of the fact is the fact that Deshaun Watson is a starting quarterback in the NFL, one of the faces of the league, a guy that is going to be the highest paid player in the NFL this year. Like, and the way the Browns even set up the contract, knowing that he was likely to be suspended, like if you're Roger Goodell, and just basically with everything that's gone on with this guy off the field in the past 12 months, like, I just don't know if you're going to want this guy on the field.
It's his golden opportunity to capitalize on the times. Back then, it wasn't trendy. Black Lives Matter was not trendy. So you could have a situation like Colin Kaepernick where he gets blackballed. Back then, women's rights wasn't trendy like that. Like, it wasn't the Me Too movement. This was, you talking about years ago, before the Me Too movement. It's different. Now you have all those things that are trends, and a lot of people is using that to their advantage as corporations. You see people or organizations hiring more women now, hiring a little bit more people of color. So now, if you're the NFL, you know what time you're in. You know the fan base that you really want to collect and bring into the game, which is the female fan base. And you know this can tarnish that. So that's
Yeah,
why.
like let me cut in here really quickly, Lil. Like, could you just imagine? And I'm not trying to put us in anyone else's shoes or anything, but can you imagine if you're a massage therapist for the Cleveland Browns and you see Deshaun Watson's name on the list for tomorrow? Like, that's got to be a scary feeling, right? And I don't know much in life for certain, but one thing I can say, I'm gonna take a pretty good guess. Deshaun Watson's next massage therapist is a male. I'm just gonna guess.
That's funny.
Moving forward, all of his massage therapists will be men. That has to happen because there's no way in hell he's gonna have female massage therapists after all the allegations happening for sure.
Ladies and gentlemen, I know y'all not getting tired of watching In the Huddle over and over again. So like and subscribe to the channel and receive these new notifications of new uploaded content that will be coming your way. Ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the rest of your day. I'm out. Peace.